Okay, so my name is Wilson Lawrence. I am half Nigerian. I've never been to Nigeria. And I'm half West Indian from the Caribbean, but I was born in the UK. So my mother and father were invited to England in the late 50s, early 60s as part of the Windrush.
Hello and welcome to Obehi Podcast. I'm your host, Obehi A14, and I strongly believe that everyone has a story to share. Now let's get started into this episode.
Project to boost the infrastructure that was suffering after the Second World War in the UK. Father meets mother at a dance. Back then in England, things were pretty much segregated for blacks and whites. But I've seen pictures of my mother and father at a dance. They met each other, and she told me the story that she saw this big, tall, handsome prince that walked in the room. And my mother was a great storyteller, and she said that in those days, all of the women, they had fans, fans like this. And what you'd do is you'd cover your mouth like this. And he had to walk down a line of 5 girls and ask them permission to dance. 4 of them declined. My mother was on the end, and she accepted. And that was the beginning of my father, Samuel Oriagun, and my mother, Vera Lawrence.
That's so lovely. That's lovely. I love that.
Yeah, but that marriage didn't last very long. It only lasted about 5 years. It would appear that the cultural differences between traditional West Indians and traditional Nigerian men were like electricity and water. My father, I think, didn't believe in monogamy. So he was out sowing his wild oats, and you just do not do that with my mum. She told me a story one night. Let me see if I can get into my mother's character. And he came home, and his breath was smelling of whiskey, and I could smell cheap perfume on him, and I knew what he'd been doing. So I waited for him to turn his back, and I took the frying pan and I just took it to the back of his head. And that I can actually remember because he fell over me. I was sitting on the floor, and he broke his arm.
No way.
My father, from what I can gather, because I don't really have much of a memory of my father, but my father, as lascivious as he was, seemed to be one of these. He was a love rat, right? And he was very charming, very handsome, like his son, of course. And but he was just irresponsible with women, but in a very funny and lovable way.
So your mother didn't even ask for, let's talk about this. What really happened? Instead, she concluded that she just took a step.
Well, actually, I believe that he took that advice from my Auntie Christina, who was the wife of my father's oldest Nigerian brother, who were also living in England. She said, just take the pan and hit him in the back of the head. Sorry, that was a really bad Nigerian accent, wasn't it?
But did that resolve the problem? Is that how the relationship actually ended, or maybe they come back again then after a while? And
I do believe that my mother and father tried to have more children, but because of the way my father was, my mother was under a lot of stress, and those two who were twins, they died at birth. My sister lived for about 6 hours, old enough to name her Louise. She's buried somewhere in London, and my brother was stillborn. But years and years and years later, and I'm talking about in the 90s, in the late 90s, I then discovered that my father, after he moved back to Nigeria in the late mid to late 70s, he had 5 more children. So I have 5 half siblings out there, which I am in contact with. I've not met them yet. And it's kind of like a scary but exciting moment to discover that you have brothers and sisters. And that was always my wish as a little child. I wanted brothers and sisters. But I'm not sure it would have worked because I grew up very selfish, and I used to beat my cousins up for coming and playing with my toys, which I would spend time hiding.
All right. Anyway, sorry for the steep bed for what happened there to your brother and sister. Those who died, of course. Then you have many more now, and that are living in Nigeria. I also believe maybe on the side of your mother. But that is actually the thing about life, is that it's not just straightforward sometimes. But if it were straightforward, it would not be interesting. You know, the other time we were together in LinkedIn Live, no, when we were talking about storytelling, and as I'm thinking back, I sort of imagine what a story it would be if there were no conflict. In that you would just take a book and read, there is no conflict in this story. That would be a very boring story. Nobody will want to read that kind of story, because life itself is full of conflict. And that is what makes it interesting, intriguing. And because now there is danger, there is fear. You don't know what is going to happen next. That is actually what makes the story. Because you want to feel something to connect to you. You talk about your mother. You talk about her taking a fly pan and hitting your father on the head. Any person can remember, can have something to relate to there.
My father.
No, go on.
Well, I didn't see my father after my 5th birthday. And this is a little bit of a complicated story. So when my mother and father separated and then got divorced, my mother put me in the care system in England because my father wanted to take me out of the country, apparently, and send me to his parents in Nigeria. My mum wasn't having any of that, so she hid me in the foster care system. He found out where I was, abducted me from school, and hid me in another home in the south of England. And this was all in the newspapers at the time, very exciting, and stuff like this. But so he couldn't actually get me out of the country. All I knew was that I was in a new foster home, and I was happy. I had my 7th birthday. I still have my 7th birthday party photos that I look at, and I looked like a happy little boy. There's even a picture of my father visiting on my 7th birthday, I believe. But my father then got ill. He stopped paying the maintenance. My mother found out where I was through the help of a private detective. And then there was a legal issue which stated that my mother was not allowed to take me out of that foster home. But she then worked tirelessly to satisfy the criteria which she had to meet in order to take custody of me, which she did. And I went back to live with her. But by then, some psychological damage had happened, and I started acting out with my mum and things like that. But that was the beginning of my development, I guess. I never saw my father again until one day, and this is an amazing story. I was sitting in my kitchen in Leicester, which is in England, and I had this thought impulse. I wonder if the directorate inquiries can find my family in London, because my mother had dropped nearly all of my Nigerian names legally, so nobody could find me. And so I rang the directory inquiries and I asked, if I give you a Nigerian surname, can you tell me if they at least exist in London? The woman said, I can tell you, but I can't give you the number because it's data protection. So I gave her the name and she said, yes, this family does exist in London. And there was this, I mean, this has been 27 years. And there was this excitement that came up in me. And I couldn't even remember them physically, but I just recognized that they were family. And I'd not really had family life. I'd always been in the care system. And then the care system extended into my early career by spending 12 years in the British Army as a professional soldier. So I was disappointed, and I'm thinking, well, how can I get this number? Because it would be illegal for this operator to give me the number. Put the phone down after I told her the story. And then I think something like 5 minutes later, the phone rang and there was a woman on the phone, and she said, "I'm the operator who you spoke to. And I'm not supposed to do this," but she gave me contact information on how to contact this family. Honestly, I nearly passed out and fell on the floor. I was that excited. Scared. I think every range of emotion was going through me. Could you imagine that? You know, you've not seen your family for 27 years, and you've got this number. You're looking at this number, and you know that if you dial that number, you're going to be speaking to someone who is your own flesh and blood. I dialed the number, and a young female came on, very well spoken. I'm normally a very confident person, and I started stuttering my words, and I said to her words to the effect that, "Please don't think that this is a crank call, but I believe that I may be related to you. My name is Wilson." She said, "Hold the line a moment." I thought, okay, fine. And then a lady came on. I'm not even going to try and do the Nigerian accent because everybody will fall on the floor laughing. She came on, she said hello, and I repeated what I said to the younger female. And before I'd even finished, she stopped and she said, "Wilson." I started crying. I dropped the phone. My knees started shaking. It was one of the most incredible moments of my life up until then. Cut a long story, they were my family. A couple of weeks later, got in the car, drove to London, and I walked into this house. Now, your senses never, ever forget. You might push things down into your subconscious mind and your unconscious mind, but your senses never forget. I walked into this big terraced house, 3-story house in Peckham in South London. And as soon as I walked through the door, everything came alive. I remembered the smell of the paraffin heaters. I remembered the taste of the hot pepper chicken soup that they'd made me with gari and okra. I remembered it, although I was remembering it from a sensory point of view. And all of the family were there. All of my handsome cousins, my beautiful cousins, my uncle was there, my auntie was there. And it was like a grand reunion. It was incredible. It was one of the most defining moments of my adult life.
That is so powerful. You see, this is human story. And it's really incredible. It's incredible. All right, tell me. So how is the situation now with your cousins, of course, with your stepbrother also and sister that are in Nigeria? Tell me about the family reunion after that moment.
Okay, so I have 5. My oldest brother, his name is Femi. He is married and he's living a successful business life and private life in the US. The next brother below him, his name is Shegun. He managed to get himself a scholarship at Harvard, and he is a published author. And he's moved on since his scholarship, but he's still in the US, about to get married this month, I believe. Then my younger brother, his name is Nelson. He is going to university and will at some point be going to the UK on a scholarship program to study there. Then there is my sister. Her name is Ibukun. She is a fashion designer. She's married and she's got 2 young children. I believe she's in Benin City with Nelson. And my older sister, her name is Yetunde, and she is a nurse, and she moved to the UK and is working in the Salisbury Plain area, which is also a coincidence because that is where I did a lot of my military training. I've never met them physically, but you know what they say, time is something, all good things come to him who has patience.
That's true. That's true. And that is, I don't know how many times I'm going to repeat the word powerful. That is powerful. All right. Now, Wisi, tell me. Now we know a bit about you, which is actually why we are here. We are intentional about knowing the story behind the people that come here, because it is our job to tell our story. Now, what influenced your choice of career? Tell me more about that. That is interesting for me.
I chose to run from my family because there was a lot of childhood trauma. I wasn't a good performer at school. I thought that I couldn't learn. I thought I was stupid. So the easiest thing for me to do was to run away and become a soldier. But little did I know that I'd have such a great 12-year career going through the ranks and becoming a commander for long-range weapons, doing surveillance, doing counterterrorism operations, also as a commander as well. So the army became like a surrogate family for me. My mother and I wouldn't say that we parted company, but there was a lot of distance between us because of things that I'm not really happy to go into right now. But there was that wedge. Ultimately, we did come back together for her last years, and unfortunately, she passed earlier on this year, and I gave her the funeral that everybody on this Caribbean island would never ever forget. Anyway, that's something else.
Sorry about that.
It's life. It's life, and so that's the reason why I went into the military. I was actually running away, but I became successful in the military. When I came out of the military, I started working for one of the major banking groups in the UK, the Lloyds Bank Group, as a financial consultant. I grew up, loving suits and ties. I liked that corporate look, and that's what I got. They were interviewing for a university graduate to fill this position, and I talked my way into that job like a Tiberian bat sucking blood from some animal. I was not letting that opportunity go, and I got in. And so I stayed there for a few years, but I was very unsettled as a civilian. I didn't make the transition from career soldier, to civilian because I was still locked in my identity as a commander, and that identity in the civilian theatre of life does not work at all. So I started getting depressed, I started failing, and I started moving from address to address, and things got really challenging. I lost all my savings. And then I discovered the Mormon Church. That's another story. They put me back on my feet. I started to recover, and then I did something that I said I would never do. I moved to London. When in London, I became a national account manager for a large cellular company. And then in 2001, I quit the UK and I went to live in the Bavarian Alps, which is southern Germany. I trained as an English language coach, set up my own business, and then I transitioned into a personal development and performance coach, which I am now. So I help people to transform their business and or personal lives from where they are now to where they want to be, simply by helping them to get the results that they can be happy with. And the reason why I did that is because in 2015, I went through a personal life storm myself. And rather than fall into pools of self-pity and despair, I looked up rather than look down, and I found my own personal development. I started listening to podcasts. I started reading. I mean, reading is something that I never do, but I started reading because I recognized that I needed to lift myself out of this, and I recovered very quickly. And I liked what I was learning. I liked the content. I liked how it was being delivered. And I guess the showman in me, the extroverted side of me, said to me, you know, you could do that, and you could probably do it better than these guys. And so that's what I did. I started to develop myself, and I became this coach. And I was successful in coaching large German and Austrian companies. And I'm going to do some name dropping now. So I was the communications coach for Red Bull Media House, Land Rover Jaguar in Austria, the BMW Motor Group, also the Porsche Motor Group, which covers the brand Porsche, Volkswagen, Skoda, and Audi, and a few other companies as well. So I think that when you apply yourself, when you know what your identity is, and when you make good choices, you can do anything that you put your mind to. It's all about the choices and the decisions that you make. I didn't always have this success. I didn't have this success until later in life. So I'm quite a late developer because I wasn't interested in learning. I didn't take life seriously. I wasn't being accountable for my life. I had money problems. I had relationship problems, not just with other people, but with myself. But when my long-term relationship ended and I ended up alone in a mountain hut in Bavaria with my beloved dog, that's when things started to change. I started finding I can learn, I can retain knowledge, I can develop myself. I know what my identity is. And all of these teachers started flowing to me. These lessons started flowing to me. And I just started assimilating and acting on everything, or pretty much most things that I was learning. And that has culminated in the fact that I'm here now doing this job that I'm doing, serving others by creating content and helping to give them value.
Thank you so much for that. That story is important. Now, I want to go back to when you just entered the army, you have been running away from something. You know, life is very interesting. It's very interesting because sometimes people think that something happened to them. It shouldn't have happened to them. But you don't know. Life is so complex that you cannot really understand it until you have passed through the experience. You can only look back and begin to put the pieces together. What if you were not running away? Probably you would not get into the army. Maybe if you never get into the army, your life would take a different trajectory. And who knows what it would have become?
Had I not gone into the military, I would have failed at school. I would have gone into a mundane, boring job. I would not have developed the attributes that I have now or the skills that I have now. And to be quite honest with you, I don't think that my life would have been of, when I say value, I'm not talking in the terms of monetary value, but in that rich wealth of experience, knowledge, and capability. I don't think, and I actually, it's not that I don't think, I believe I would not have been the person that I am now.
Thank you for that. You are just making me to remember a lot of things. In 2020, which is 3 years ago, when I started this podcast, actually, I did an entire year talking about self-improvement because I believe it is important, because I have to pass through this. And I believe if I can benefit from this idea of improving yourself, then somebody else can also benefit in it. So I spent an entire year just talking about self-improvement, self-improvement. Then at the point I said, okay, maybe I need to write a book about it. And I wrote a book about it. And I think I wrote like up to 2 books on the story of self-improvement. I wrote a book that is called Identity or the Crisis of Identity. Now, one of these books, I was talking about Viktor F. Frankl, for example, talking of identity, Look at what Viktor F. Frankl have to go through in Nazi Germany. Now, because you will say, I will only take the right step if all the light in front of me are green. But it's not going to be green. It means you will die in this world, never amounting to anything, thinking that the light will be green. The light will never be green. The light will always be red or yellow. So if you want to take the move, take the move. It's going to be hard, yes, but do it anyway. So Viktor F. Frankl, like every other people that were head in the Nazi camp, he was still writing while he was there. What I'm trying to say to people is that if you are going to find yourself, you are going to fight for it. There is a price to be paid. If you can't pay the price, then you don't deserve it. All right, now, where I want to go with this is this one. You got into the military. I don't believe that every person that got into the military got the chance to be able to become what they want to become. What did you have to do to make the difference? When did you know that the step that you were taking, even though you were there in the military, was the right one for you? Help me understand that. That is important for me.
I didn't. Quite simply, I didn't know if it was the right decision for me. I just know that it was safe. I was away from my family. I was away from the trauma. And I was learning how to be a man. I was learning how to be a soldier. I was learning national pride. I was learning respect. I was learning discipline. And it wasn't until, I guess, much later in life, I found it very easy to go through the ranks. I was just naturally gifted like that, I suppose. I became an instructor also in the military because of my attributes. I am a natural coach. I'm a natural instructor. So I went into the training team. Then I guess knowing or being slightly aware of what I wanted attention. And so, yeah, let's become an instructor. Became a battalion instructor in the training wing. Then I went to the depot of the back then Queen's division. Sadly, she's passed away. And I became a recruit instructor for 2 years, training recruits, raw recruits, how to become professional soldiers. From there, I was sent to Luxembourg on secondment to train the Luxembourg army. Then I went back to my battalion. And then after a few years, I decided that I wanted to come out of the battalion and try something else as a civilian before I got too old to be considered professionally for a suitable position. Didn't know at that time how difficult that was going to be, but that struggle and everything that I'd been through previously to that was building on and strengthening my attribute of resilience. And you had to be tough back then in the 80s.
All right. So everybody, I'm welcoming you back to our conversation. We were recording before, so the connection had a problem as usual. So we seem have to reschedule the appointment. So we are here again. That is why you see the same person, even though the clothes has changed. We are seeing the same people. I'm still here. So let's just get the ball rolling. So we'll see. First of all, how are you doing today? Let's start from there because we are just like starting a part of it now.
Well, today I'm doing really well because I knew that I was going to have this podcast interview. So I had to prepare myself. And I have quite a strict morning routine. because I believe in morning routines to start conditioning yourself for positivity and success momentum. But today I did a little bit of extra with some alternate nasal breathing and some Tai Chi, which I really love to do.
All right, that's interesting. So the last time we talked about you, of course, all the people that are watching in up to this point, they already understand that. So today, I like you to spend some time about your training because I think that is really very important. How you are helping people through your training. Would you like to start with how did you get into the training part of it? I think that is very important because we're going to spend some time there today.
I've always been in some kind of instruction. So, if you remember last week, we were talking about my military career. While I was in the military, yeah, so I was in the military and I became a military instructor. First of all, for the internal training teams. So that would be for tactics, unarmed combat, battlecraft. Any military skill that a soldier would need within the battalion. I was responsible for that with my training team, of course. And then after that, I decided that I wanted to be a recruit instructor. So I went to the depot, which was called the depot, the Queen's Division, because I was part of the Queen's Division. So the good lady was my boss, and I became a recruit instructor. So we would take, young men off the streets who had enlisted, they'd gone through their screening, they were eligible to be recruits, British Army recruits. Then they would come to me and my training team at the depot, Queen's Division. Then we'd spend, I can't remember, it's something like 16 weeks converting them from vagabonds into professional soldiers. And that's really where it began. And then after that, I was on secondment to the Luxembourg military to go and train some of their officers. And so you can see, I've been around training and development, albeit in the military, for most of my career. And I guess because of my personality and my character, part of my identity is to be a bit of a show person anyway. So that makes it easier for me to stand up in front of people and give value. Then when I came out of the military, I went to work for one of the big English banks, which was the Lloyds Bank Group, as a financial consultant. But the onboarding process was a very lengthy one. So it was terrible. I mean, we had to stay in this 5-star hotel near Gatwick Airport, awful hotel. I'm being ironic. And but the course was very good. And I remember that the instructor, the way that he would instruct was so captivating. And because I was already attracted to that kind of activity, I thought, yeah, that's amazing. And so later on in life, when I left Germany, which is back, the story goes backwards and forwards, I then became a self-employed English communications coach, teaching language techniques, also effective meetings, presentations, negotiations to companies. I mean, I'm talking some of the big German companies in the automotive industry. So BMW, Porsche Group, Mercedes, Land Rover Jaguar, Red Bull as well. And yes, I'm going to name drop these companies. And so that's really how I got started in coaching. And then the natural transition from that into a personal development coach came next. And I thought, well, I need another challenge, because people were giving me feedback saying, oh, you make people feel really good. You seem to be really, you're a natural coach. So I started learning how to coach people. I hired my own coach, and I launched myself as a personal development and continuous performance coach. And that's how I got into coaching.
That's very interesting. And I would like you to explore a part there. When you were explaining just now, you did make mention of how you transform people. I think in the coaching industry, one of the things that you guys use a lot is a transformation. And I really wanted to spend some time there. How do you transform, say, ordinary street boys in UK, in the street of London, for example, into professional fighters in the military? How do you do that? What is required for that to happen?
Well, they have already been screened, of course, so they will go through a selection process. Now, I mean, you're talking years ago now, so that selection process may have changed. And of course, we have a whole different social standing everywhere now. So the mentality has changed. But back then, what would happen, they would go off to a selection center where they would choose either Army, Navy, or Air Force. And then there would be this profiling to see whether or not they would make a good soldier, sailor, or airman. And then they would look for the attributes that they would need in order to be successful in their future roles. So a lot of these guys are already with the desire to do something in the military. It's not to say that they will just come off the streets or from some home or even from a military family and say, I want to be a soldier. They already have the desire to be in Her Majesty's, or now His Majesty's armed forces. When I went in years and years and years ago, it was quite a scary experience because I was very thin, I was weak, I didn't have the social competencies that I had now. I didn't have the emotional intelligence that I had now. So it kind of molded me, and so without realizing, this is all about personal development, developing your character, and then you grow into that character. And when I became a military instructor, I didn't want to be this stereotypical drill sergeant that you saw on these old movies, shouting at people and, calling them your horrible little man. I just thought that, you'd be fair, you'd be firm, and you'd be friendly. And I live by those three things. There's other things that I live by as well. Yeah. But doing that, it makes you more effective as an instructor, makes you more effective as a coach, and people give you their best. So it's also about honesty, integrity, and transparency.
All right. Now I'm looking at you, Owesim. In the first part of this video, or actually in the beginning part of this video, because now all of them are going to be one, you did talked about your personal history, which of course help people to understand where you are coming from. Now, did that have anything to do with the choice of career that you eventually are enjoying today? You're a coach, a professional coach. You come from a rigorous training, and you are really a very good expert in what you're doing. But did your background have anything to do with this?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So first of all, I went into the military because I was running away from a difficult and challenging childhood. And then I guess that I became a personal development coach because I went into a personal life storm. My relationship after 16 years collapsed. I was living in a country that I wouldn't have normally been in had it not have been for that relationship. And one piece of advice that has always stuck with me after I came out of the military is that if anything goes wrong and you are in what you think is the lesser position, you don't look down, you look up. And I looked up, and I guess my creative imagination kicked in. And I then started looking at personal development, listening to podcasts, reading, not so much because I don't like reading, but now I do. And I really liked what I was hearing, and I recovered emotionally very quickly. And I guess that a lot of people from our ethnic origins would relate to this when I say we are very good at being resilient. So I'd already had that resilience. So that helped me to recover. And I thought, well, if I can help myself in the way that I am helping myself, I can help other people. So I started helping other people, and I started helping ex-military people, veterans who were struggling with the transition from becoming a civilian from professional soldier. And that's how I started with a mastermind group. Then I got into some relationship coaching. Then it went into personal development because I was already working with companies, especially in the automotive industry. And one thing led to another. And you always step up because as a freelance coach, you always have to sharpen the saw to make sure that your skills are relevant and they are up to date. Otherwise, people would just overtake you, and that's your old history. It's a bit like a car or a new car or a phone. Within 6 months, it's out of date. So you have to always update your skills and knowledge.
All right, that's great. That's great. That's very interesting. Also, because the technology is moving very fast. Everything is moving very fast these days. In the time past, you could say, this is how it used to be 50 years ago, so it's going to be probably the same way today. But in the question of 5 years, things can change so fast that it will look like the distance will be 100 years. So things are really very fast. So people that are working in the transformation industry, in teaching industry, in the educational industry, I think they need to, they understand what that means. All right. Now, looking at the people that come to you for help, the people that you are training, that you are coaching, what would you say somebody need to have to make the process of transformation easier for you and for the individual?
Well, it's not me that's transforming them. They're doing the work themselves. As a coach, it's my role to bring out from them. So if I start telling people what they should be doing, that makes me a consultant or a mentor. So I really believe in staying entrenched in my role as a coach. And the role as a coach is to bring out and not to tell. The way that you do that is by asking smart and intelligent questions. As soon as somebody starts saying things like, well, you should do this, you must do that, okay, that changes the role of the person and they become a consultant. So I always observe what we call the drama triangle, which are the three roles that we can automatically assume or we get pulled into. So you've got the protector, you've got the rescuer, and then you've got the victim. And the general idea is that you don't get pulled into those roles, but you ask questions, and then you ask if the person is open for advice or help, because sometimes people just want to be listened to, and then they resent when you are forcing what you believe is good advice on them, thinking that you're doing a good thing, when in actual fact it's not. It's the opposite. Of course, you can give people advice. I prefer to give counsel, and counsel for me is more authentic because it means that you've been through that situation and you've come out of it the other end in a good way.
Mm-hmm. All right. Yesterday we were together in our audio room program about storytelling, because of course I'm referencing that because I see that you make mention of talking and listening a number of times here, which sort of tells me that you use a lot of storytelling in what you do. And of course, any person listening to you can see that you have a very good grasp of the ability to tell story. So you want me to ask the question, how much role does storytelling play in what you do in your coaching program?
I guess I learned it from my mum, because my mother was a great storyteller. And these religious, traditional Black women, oh my goodness, they know how to belt out a story. And I think it's something that the older generation was very good at, because they didn't have the technology that we have today, smartphones, internet, and things like this. So they relied on telling stories. And when they told stories, it's almost as if you were living it with them. They could plant that picture. So it was kind of, oh, can you imagine how I was feeling when that guy just sounded his horn? Well, this rage just came up inside of me, and I walked down that street and I put some bad words on him, and he was never the same again. That was typical. That would be typically my mother. And then she would swap kind of like her character, and that was so entertaining. But people don't do that anymore. So I know that storytelling has, from a technical point of view, it has a structure. I just do it naturally.
But it cannot be even be more powerful than when it is done naturally. Which you see, I want to believe that your mother, just like many other African women, just like my mother, for example, in Africa when I was growing up, they didn't learn it in school. They didn't read it in a book. They learn it naturally. And like you were
Yes.
saying, at one point in one of my book, I was saying, of course, I was making reference to the women that were going to the farm, and they talk from the moment they meet till the time they get to the farm. And when they start returning home, from the time they leave, they meet their friend, till the time they get home, when they are going to the market, they keep telling stories. They never stop. So I was saying in this book, what are they talking about?
Well, the
They're
thing
telling
is,
story. Yeah, please go.
what I think, it's a bit like how we write, So if you look at the quality of how somebody writes today, especially in a social media post, they're doing what I call conscious writing. The writing as it comes into and then they don't go back and edit it, right? And I think that a lot of the older generation, I mean, I'm talking about the 60 plus year olds, they have this ability to relate a story either as a story or advice, but there's always a kind of moral. How can I explain it? There's a moralistic value to it, and it's entertaining, but it's meant to be uplifting as well. So I mean, my mum would tell me stories about what she would do as a little girl. There is and I guess you emulate that, don't you? You follow your parents, but now it's so difficult for the younger generation to do because they always have something in their hand and they're scrolling TikTok, Facebook, or Instagram, and it takes away, I think, that vital skill of telling a story. But so I'm communication trained as well. I'm also trained in behavior analysis, and so if I said to you, whatever you do, I don't ever want you in the next 10 seconds to think about a blue elephant. What are you thinking about? What can you see?
I'll be taking out the blue elephant.
Exactly, because I planted it. I planted it there. Can you imagine what it would be like? Just try and imagine walking into a car showroom and you can see, yes, the new car that you're going to buy, but it's under a cover. You can see the shape, the outline of the car that you've always wanted. But the sales staff have put it underneath this satin cover, and you pull the satin cover slowly off, and it reveals the car. For some, that might be a Porsche 911. I mean, I don't know why somebody would want to buy such a car, but for some, it might be. Sorry, I beg your pardon. I'm having a dig at somebody, but I'm saying that it could be anything. So you can plant the scenario. Sorry, I can't stop laughing now. You can plant the scenario in someone's head, and they fill in the rest because we're using their creative imagination to do that.
Nobody can even doubt it at all that you are really an expert in those areas. But I'm sort of curious. The other day, I was talking to a Canadian visual artist. He work in the like of Transformer, another big budget film like the Jurassic Park. So I was asking him, now you know that what you are doing is not true, no, in the sense of the image that you are creating, they're not really real. But me now, going to the cinema, I watch the film and I'm crying. How do you feel about that? That you are in a position to be able to make me cry, make me laugh, make me feel angry, just by telling your story. I'm sort of coming back to you that we are using I don't want to say whether the intelligence of the people to play on there to be able to get maybe what we want. How does that make you feel as a coach, knowing that you have that power in your hands? Of course, looking at storytelling.
For me personally, it makes me feel quite proud that I've got a skill that, when it's used ethically, you can invoke emotions and feelings in people. So, for example, if you're coaching someone in performance and they're not performing well, and you say, well, let's take this forward 6 months. You're not taking action. You're getting the poor results that you've told me, which are not making you happy, but you go forward 6 months and you're still doing the same thing. How do you think you're going to feel in the next 6 months? And they will fill in the rest. So basically, it's a bit like acting. So you've got to be able to pull out these emotions and feelings in people to get them to react in a good way. And that's what an actor is doing. An actor's role is to tell a story. I mean, I guess that I got good at this when I was part of a church. I mean, I know that people in Nigeria are very religious, but I learned how to make a whole congregation cry by just bearing my testimony. And I used to have confession's good for the soul, right? I used to. You're laughing already. And I used to have little bets with one of my friends in this church that who could make people cry in the congregation. But you're not lying. You are telling your story about how you were testifying that you knew that God was true, that he was your savior, he was your creator, and that he exists. And then you would tell a story. And usually that story would be something about a challenge, about some kind of hardship or adversity that was there. So you've got that pain point. Can you imagine how that would feel? You put your card into the machine, you type in your code, and all of a sudden there's no money there. Could you imagine how I was feeling? So you're getting people, you're connecting with people, and then the turnaround comes. Yeah, then you tell the story from a different perspective. This is called a nested loop. Or you use a technique which is called the Zeigarnik effect to keep people's interest boiling just below the surface. And then you deliver what you say is the cliffhanger, or you deliver their prize, and everybody lived happily ever after, and everybody can breathe easy and they're happy. Then you've told a good story. I somehow have developed this skill. So I never learned how to do this. I just not by attending any course. I just learned to do it naturally through my own life's events, watching my mum, and I guess that if you value being the center of attention as a kid, you learn how to tell stories, especially when you don't have technology to circumvent that by looking at posts in social media.
We can build the image of our enemy so that the person you were living with happily just now, because of the story you are exposed to right now, you can almost be fighting with the person. The animal, other animals do not do this. Only human beings do this. And that prompts me into the power of emotion. How relevant is emotion in the story that we tell? Because that is, if you just tell me figures, I will not react. But if you lace it in an emotion, I will cry. How do we do this?
Well, I think that emotions really are part of a mechanical decision-making process that we have without realizing it. And so your emotions are going to be triggered by an event, so we live life through our five senses, and we take that five sensory data, which then comes in through our conscious mind, and it's going to filter down into our subconscious mind, where all of that programming is. We call it the paradigm. And then in our unconscious mind, these are where our emotions and our feelings are stored, and that's all mixed together. So the ego is then looking at that, and the ego's job is really our orientation vehicle in this world. So how, without an ego, we wouldn't be anywhere. If somebody says, oh, that person's got such an ego, hello, we've all got an ego, but it depends on how that ego is functioning based on historical programming. So we have to look at the emotions. So if you can invoke certain emotions in people, if they are not aware that their emotions are part of a decision-making system, and also that the emotions and feelings do not really reflect their true reality, then you know how to pretty much manipulate someone, and you can also manipulate their feelings and emotions.
And that places you at a very important position, in that now you are able to be on the driver's seat of the conversation. Looking at
Mhm.
communication, for example, uh, this is really very important in businesses, particularly. And of course, if you want to build an influence, you are going to have to tell a story. And it's not just telling story, you are going to tell it in a way that you are going to influence the other person that is listening to you. Uh, that means you need to know how to tell story well. But you know how to tell story not because you went to a storytelling course. You just said no, and I also confirmed that uh, many women that I knew of in Africa, in my village where I grew up, never went to any storytelling school. They never read any book about storytelling, but they are professional storyteller. Of course, your mother is also a good evidence of that. But not many of us are this good. Because storytelling is also an act, which means we can learn it. What do you have to
Mhm.
say about that? How can we approach the learning process of storytelling?
Okay, one thing is, because something is old, you don't necessarily throw it away. Speak to your parents, speak to your senior aunts and uncles, speak to your grandparents, ask them questions about, ask your grandfather, what was it like for you growing up as a young boy? What was it like when you first went to school? And listen to them, get drawn into that story. We've become ageist, I think, in the younger generation. And of course, it's more attractive, once again, to look into social media for extrinsic motivation, maybe, and ideas. But I think that all of these stories, and don't forget that a lot of this is cultural. I mean, I even remember my foster father back in England, who was a Normandy evacuee in the Second World War. The way he could tell a story was, it would knock the socks off even my mum. Believe me, I guess it's because I'm a former soldier myself, and so every story that he told about bombs going off, being mortared, planes flying overhead, I could relate to that from a point of realism, because I know what it was like. But whereas my mum would do it, it was more emotional and it was more entertaining, because she was talking about events of her life in a slightly different way, and I didn't actually connect with that. So it's something to do with our attention span, I think, and having the desire to listen and to learn that skill, because I think that we learn that skill from our parents.
Mhm. The skill to tell the story, or to learn to listen to story, or to learn to listen, because sometimes in communication we don't learn that part of the listening part. Even though by merely figuratively just looking at ourselves, we have 2 ears, we have one mouth. Uh, we don't learn the listening part, so we often miss the detail. What do you have to say about that? Because you are a communication expert, we can say that. I want you to speak on the listening part. How do we learn that?
You make a decision that you are not going to start talking until the other person has finished. Simple.
That is a good advice.
Yeah, because I mean, if you're in a group of people and you watch two people having a conversation, and I do this as well, right? But if you watch two people conversing, the other person starts speaking even before the other person who's speaking has stopped. So that means that they're formulating their reply before the other person has finished their statement. And that's something that we've got to unlearn, that we listen. So we need to listen, and we need to make the decision not to interrupt the other person, let them finish, and then we respond. I think it's a part of it's a discipline, and it's something that we all need to learn, because I'm listening to you, and as I'm listening to you, I'm already formulating my answer. And then I may even interrupt you before you even finish speaking.
Now, some clients come to you that you are going to coach. You're going to help them understand, going to help them straighten up their life, maybe relating to how to have a clarity or how to have a better focus on what they are doing so that they can get a better result at the end of the day. Where do you start? What do you do? I want to go back to that transformation again, because it is very important for me and also for the listener, that you are transforming people that are ordinary into extraordinary. It's a process. They need to move from point A to point B. But where do you start from?
Okay, so let me just make that point again. I don't transform people. They transform themselves based on the work that they are prepared to do. So I have tools for that. And one of the tools is what I call a life assessment arena. And that looks at certain elements of a person's life, and they award that element anywhere between 0 to 10, 0 being totally dissatisfied or unhappy, to 10 being totally happy, or it's the best thing that's ever happened to them. And it covers their self-belief. So I would ask them, where are you on a scale of 0 to 10? 0 having absolutely no self-belief, 10 having all of the self-belief that they would ever need in their life to do anything and everything that they can with a level of confidence that would knock everybody away. Okay. Then the next one would be their physical life. That's about their health, their fitness, their personal image. So that's an umbrella. They would award that between 0 and 10. Their personal life. Do they have everything in life that they need to live a comfortable, abundant, prosperous, and fulfilling life? The next one would be key relationships. Key relationships are not just the lovely relationships that they have with their significant others, but key relationships, strategic relationships, maybe that are a little bit strained, that they need to work on. It could be with a relative, it could be with a manager, it could be with a colleague. Then the next area would be with their business. If they are entrepreneurs, how happy are they with their business between 0 and 10? Notice I haven't asked for any explanations. Then the next one would be their job. So you might have a business, right? But you also have a job within that business. You might be the CEO. If they're not a business owner, they could be an HR representative or a sales representative. How happy are you with that role? Not your performance, but with that role between 0 and 10. And then finally, the last sphere I look at is their financial sphere. Where are they between 0 and 10? 0 being, I'm not happy with my financial situation, to 10, yeah, I'm totally fine with it. And so they award themselves. And so I can go back to any one of those parameters and say, well, you've awarded your personal sphere with a 6. What would make it a 10? I'm not going to ask, why is it only a 6? I would say, what would make it a 6? What would make your physical sphere, a 10, I beg your pardon. And these get all written down, and they become that person's objectives to work towards.
I'm thinking. All right, you say you don't transform people, right?
No, that's not my job. My job is I am the catalyst, and I use my tools to get them to do the work, because I can't say to you, I'm going to transform you. You are the one who is doing the physical work that's needed in order to bring that transformation about in your life. I'm not going to be accountable for that, but I'm going to empower you to be accountable to make those changes.
All right. You already answered the question I was thinking. Because by your explanation and also for the reaffirmation, you're actually the instrument that is going to help them transform themselves. Let me put it that way. But actually, I look at you as the as the force behind everything. Because otherwise, they wouldn't come to you. Because if I could do everything on my own, why do I need you? I don't need you. But in this case, that we can say that they need you because you are helping them to sort of navigate their own life. All right, that is perfectly fine. Now, when you look at individual, are you able to know whether this one can have a happy ending? Okay, happy ending in this sense, we mean that at the end of the journey that you are going to pass them through, help them, that they are going to be able to transform themselves positively, or they are going to stop on the way, or can you have that kind of impression in the beginning?
It can happen. And before I onboard a client, I do a committed to change activity. Um, and it's just usually a worksheet to get them to write down what it is that they want to achieve and how it will affect them. And by doing that, what I'm doing is I'm creating an image in their heads of what life would be like after they have transformed. Of course, it can happen that some people are not committed to their commitments, and you really know this when you're in a session with them and they start to repeat the same patterns of behavior over and over again, and they're getting the same results that are not bringing them any happiness, any progress, or anything like that. And that's not the coach's fault, because the results from coaching are dependent upon the work that the coachee puts in.
Thank you so much for that.
You're
Um,
welcome.
in one of our audio, LinkedIn audio, you did say something important that we need the role model. We need people that other can look up to at one point. And if we look around today, particularly in the post-COVID, we see that the coaching industry has really blossomed. When we are born, we don't have all the instruments to be able to navigate this experience called life. So we need help from somebody who have gone the journey before to show us, this is the way it is, so that you can save yourself. Because life is too short. We don't have the time, the material time to be able to make the experience of life. By that I mean, for you to know that food is edible, it doesn't necessarily need to pass through the scientific experiment. It needs to pass through natural experiment. That somebody need to eat that food. If that food is poisonous, you will eat it, you will die. You become part of the human experiment. This is how our ancestors know that this food is good, the other food is bad. This is the amount of food you can eat that you will live. If you eat that certain amount, you're going to have stomach ache. So, as an individual, we cannot live because it takes thousands of years to make that experiment. For that reason, we are going to rely on our history, rely on those who know to teach those who do not. I'm actually going to cut the long story short by saying how relevant is the role that you are occupying is in the African diaspora community. People who have undergone the journey, who can teach others who have gone the journey so that they can have a happy ending.
I think that what you have reflected there, for me personally, are two different things: a coach and a mentor. A mentor will show someone how they have done it and got the results out of it. All right. But a coach is there to guide the person by bringing out from them. So, yes, there's a thin dividing line between coaching and mentorship, but they are two completely different roles. I think, yeah, so I think that my experiences over the last couple of weeks is there are a lot of African, Nigerian, mainly young men who are striving to improve their lives, but they are not, and this is not a criticism, they're not using independent thought. And I think independent thought is vitally important in any person's development, because if you're not using that, you're using somebody else's structure and you're not really learning. You need specialist knowledge in order to move forwards. And that specialist knowledge, let's say it's infinite intelligence, which is out there, you can access that.
Thank you for the clarification, because you also clarified the difference between the two. So I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Now, looking back again to your work, has it ever occurred to you that maybe you have a client in front of you, or let's go back to the image that you presented on, of maybe vagabond on the street, who are going to sort of pass through a process and they become professional fighters in the army, in the British Army in this case. Let's say maybe somebody like that come to you that you are going to sort of help to transform themselves. And you will say, well, based on my experience, looking at this individual, we cannot save this one, for example. This is beyond damage. Has it ever occurred to you like that?
No, because the way that I coach, I have my own niche. I target myself towards a specific kind of client that needs what I have to offer. If, for example, I was doing what you suggest that person doesn't need a coach. That person needs a counselor or a mentor.
All right. Now you have a niche. So which type of people can benefit from the service that you render?
Anybody from junior management up to executive board level. Anybody who has issues with leadership. Anybody who has issues with time management, fear management as well. Anything to do with performance related issues in the professional field. I also do personal coaching as well, but that's something that I'm moving away from. So I'm moving more towards corporate coaching again, because personal development coaching, it's okay, but it's kind of like a sideline for me. My target area is more in the corporate world. But of course, I am capable of helping people on the personal development level as well.
Is there anything you want to say about that? Why you are moving into more towards the corporate level? Is there anything we might know about that?
No, not really. It's just personal choice. I think that when you recognize what your niche is, it's a good thing to stick within that niche, because for coaches, it's a case of, well, where am I most successful? Where am I most useful? Who has been my most successful client? You can even ask them, what was it that brought you this success? If you were to take me out of that picture, it's not about me, it's about what has been triggered in that client to get the results. So don't forget, it's helping that person to get the results that they need in order to be successful in personal development, in transformation, and that can be either in business or in their private lives as well.
All right.
So you'll get, I mean, you've seen it in LinkedIn. Somebody will say, oh, I'm a transformational coach, or I'm a life coach. I'm an executive coach. I'm a mindset coach. People can call themselves whatever they want in the coaching industry, okay? Because they recognize that that's what they are good at. So they will go and they will aim for clients within their particular niche. Mine happens to be in management up to executive board level.
As we move towards the end of it, I sort of like to ask you this. What is your satisfaction? You do all this work. What is the personal satisfaction from all this work?
My personal satisfaction comes from a sense of meaning. And the sense of meaning is, it's not about what you get paid in your bank account. So, for example, if you ask 10 people, why do you do what you do, right? They will probably not tell you that as a result of what they do, it changes something in somebody's life. They will probably say, oh, the money's good. I like working with the people. For example, I like the benefits I'm getting from my company. But if they were to read the book Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, who was incarcerated in the Second World War in Auschwitz. Yes, he was a Jew. He was a psychology student at the time, and he wrote this book. Well, he wrote it as his thesis, actually, and it became the book Man's Search for Meaning. And it's one of the best books I think anybody can ever read, because what it examines is that if you've got meaning in life, you're going to be more successful, you're going to perform better, and you're going to be more passionate about the things that you get involved in. He noticed that at Auschwitz, those people who had meaning, which meant that they had families outside, they were more likely to survive than those who had nothing. So they just gave up. So if you've got that meaning, and I think everybody should have a meaning statement, which starts my meaning statement is simply, as a result of what I do, it quite often makes something better in somebody else's life. And that's about creating radiant value.
Thank you so much for that.
You're welcome.
We usually give our guests a few seconds to promote themselves because we appreciate your time. Now, I want you to use a few seconds to promote yourself, your business. How can people find you? Tell them what to get from you and how to reach you.
Well, I mean, I will give I have a finder's email address, which I will give in a moment. But also you can find me on LinkedIn under my name, Wilson Lawrence. You can find me in Facebook under Wilson Lawrence, or in Instagram as Coach Wilson Lawrence. Very easy to find. Lawrence being spelt with a W, Lawrence. The email address is Will, which is small letters, WIL _39 at iCloud, small I with the dot, cloud.com. So that's Will _39 at iCloud.com. I don't have a website. I'm not going to have one either. So it's either social media, of which I only engage in from Fridays to Sundays at the moment, or LinkedIn.
Those who are interested in what you have said, and I believe a lot of people should be, because of the value that you dish out here, they not know how to connect you.
So what I will do as a result of this interview, I know that I told you what my niche is. I mean, I'm not going to cut myself off from everybody. I'm a coach. That is my that is my profession. That's how I make my living. But what I will do for you is I will first come, first serve. I will give 15 free life assessment arena sessions too. They only take 20 minutes. So all they would need to do is to email me on the email address that I gave you. And in the subject field, put life assessment arena. And I will take the first 15 of them. I will send them that worksheet. They can send it back to me, and then we can book a 20-minute call. Okay, it will be complimentary. And at the end of that, they will know where they are. They can set themselves some objectives. And if they want to hire me as a coach, then I'll be willing to take it a step further.
Thank you so much for that. We appreciate that. We appreciate the value. All right. So what would be your final thought here, considering what we have discussed today about you? Because we really love your story. It's rich, it's full of value, and also what you are doing. So how would you conclude the conversation?
Well, you know, in life, because I'm a coach, it doesn't mean to say that I've got life all wrapped up in a ball. You know, I'm not perfect at it. But what I am good at is realizing, using tools to fix myself, helping other people to fix themselves. So my role is to elevate and empower people to get the results that they need to get in order to get to where they want to go. And simply by creating and helping them to make better choices, and then focusing on the successful end result of making those choices. Not on how they're going to do it, but focusing on the successful end result. So I was working with someone who connected with me yesterday. I gave him a free session earlier on today by sending him a life assessment arena. He's a ghost writer, and I'm really enjoying helping people. Yeah, I like to donate at least 15% of my time, however I calculate that, to helping people free, because I realize that not everybody is financially affluent, but it goes to a certain limit. I don't mind doing one session with a person, but if they want to take it any further, then we have to look at other options.
Yeah, that is a lot that you are offering to the people, so people should pick it up and leverage it and take advantage. They should pick it and run with it. Thank you for that.
I mean, I have to be strict with that. I'll only extend that to 15 people, right? And after that, then I will cut it off. Okay.
That's good. That's fair enough. Thank you so much, brother. Thank you.
Thank you.
If you enjoy this podcast, make sure you subscribe so you never miss any of our future episodes. Rate and review Obehi Podcast and share with your friends who might need it. I remain Obehi aClasses. Thank you so much for listening, and talk to you in the next episode.